This is Business Week Armenia, CivilNet's weekly economic digest. Here's what you need to know this week. Armenia's cabinet this week proposed a measure to double taxes on small businesses in the country, saying the move is needed to boost transparency and simplify Armenia's notoriously complex tax administration. According to Finance Minister Vahe Hovhannisyan, the changes would double Armenia's turnover tax, a special form of tax that businesses with annual sales of less than $300,000 pay instead of sales tax, from 5% to 10%. That is still significantly lower than the 18 to 20% rate leveled on large enterprises. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has welcomed the proposal, telling ministers, "The turnover tax system generally deforms the economy and creates the wrong incentives. It seemed to us that by creating preferential conditions we could create a trampoline for people to grow. But instead we have created a system that does not motivate growth. We must phase out the turnover tax system altogether." The government's proposal is now being studied by Parliament's Economic Affairs Committee, which must give its approval before the changes can be put to a full vote. It was not immediately clear when that may take place. If approved, the changes would go into effect starting at the beginning of next year. The government forecasts that would allow it to collect at least $46 million in additional revenues every year. Last year, the Armenian government collected more than $5.5 billion in taxes, representing a roughly 15.5% increase in tax revenues year on year. Observers say that likely reflects both Armenia's ongoing economic boom and improved tax collection procedures. It remains unclear if and when Armenia's monetary authorities will allow the London-based financial giant HSBC to sell off its local subsidiary and exit the country, a move that would leave Armenia with no Western commercial banks. HSBC's proposed sale of its Armenia business remains under study, the country's central bank told the local news site Factor this week, without providing any timeline or additional details. Under Armenian law, the central bank is required to sign off on major changes of ownership in commercial banks. In February, HSBC announced it had reached an agreement pending regulatory approval to sell off its local subsidiary to Ardshyn Bank, Armenia's largest lender, for an undisclosed sum. HSBC Armenia reported about $27 million in earnings last year against Ardshyn Bank's roughly $156 million. Just weeks later, the Bank of Georgia Group, also based in London, revealed a $303.6 million deal to acquire Ameria Bank, Armenia's second-largest lender. The central bank moved with what observers say is unusual speed to approve that deal, greenlighting it just 1 month later. The central bank has not indicated publicly why it is taking longer to consider the HSBC sale. Earlier this year, the ratings agency Fitch said it expects Armenian banks' credit metrics to remain better than historical averages for at least the next 2 years, citing continued immigration and capital inflows from Russia. At least $7.5 billion has poured into Yerevan from Moscow since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine 2 years ago, according to official figures. Negotiations between Armenia's government and the Luxembourg-based company that owns the country's main airport over a major expansion plan continue. In a press release last week, Corporación América Airports confirmed it remains in negotiations with the government to expand Yerevan's Zvartnots International Airport and enhance commercial offerings, adding, "The total investment plan is expected to be approximately $400 million. There was no public reaction from the Armenian government, and the status of those negotiations remains unclear. Corporación América Airports, the world's largest private airport operator, is ultimately controlled by the Argentine-Armenian billionaire Eduardo Ernequian, whose sprawling business empire also includes more than 50 other airports, mostly in South America. The Armenian government signed a 30-year concession agreement with Corporación América Airports in 2001, placing management of Zvartnots in Ernequian's hands. In the more than 2 decades since, the company has poured over $160 million into the airport, including the construction of a new terminal. Zvartnots smashed its all-time passenger traffic record last year at more than 5.3 million people, representing a year-on-year increase of 46%. Observers say that is at least partially due to the rerouting of traffic to and from Russia through Armenia following the imposition of international sanctions and other restrictions on Russia's aviation sector in response to its invasion of Ukraine. And, as always, please follow CivilNet for the latest news and independent reporting from our contributors on the ground here in Armenia.